When I mentioned left hook, I was talking about Ryan Garcia because, of course, there's so much talk about what happened after the Tank Davis fight and how, his team wasn't there. Oscar wasn't there. And it was one of the things where people were like, is Ryan going to stay with Golden Boy Promotions? Well, he's signed a long-term deal with them up until 2026. And then there was a video that came out last week where Ryan was at the gym talking to this guy that has this channel. I believe his name's Bradley. And he was talking about how his team wasn't there, how Gervonta Tank Davis's team was there for him more. And listen, him and Oscar got into using their Twitter fingers, and it was glorious. I know you got some quotes there, Bryan. I kind of broke down. So why don't you give us the quotes? And because it was a lot of back and forth, and this does not look good for Ryan Garcia at Golden Boy Promotions, but I actually think it looks worse for Oscar De La Hoya.
It does. Like, what promoter does this? Go after a fighter so publicly. We're gonna unleash some of the quotes here, and there's a lot to sort of dissect here, so we're not gonna take too much time. But Oscar De La Hoya tweeted out, and this was all last week, but we're gonna talk about how it relates to potentially Ryan Garcia's future. So if this appears dated, apologies for that. But we haven't reacted to it because we were busy last week. WTF at Ryan Garcia. It's been almost 2 months, and you're still crying about the presser. The blame for your loss is on you and your quote unquote advisor, Lupe. This is Oscar De La Hoya. He is the only one who pushed you to accept that insane, in all caps, insane rehydration clause. And that is the reason you lost. Man up, own that. Also, you keep saying Tank's team offered more support for you, blah, blah, blah. Bro, they, in all caps, set you up to lose with that hydration clause. And more importantly, Al Heyman didn't even show up the entire week. Actually, he never shows up. How's that for support? We're not off to a great start. And then Ryan Garcia says in response, and this is all on Twitter, just publicly. Like, this wasn't something that was text, call, none of that shit, which is weird. Ryan Garcia, okay, buddy, you got it all figured out. Calling his promoter buddy. That's interesting. Tired of you disrespecting my whole career, and you think none of it matters. Loyalty and common sense is lost in your head. Stop treating people that way and think they will just accept it. And then just some other stuff about Ryan Garcia teasing a fight with Rolly Romero, and Oscar De La Hoya saying what he's doing is called promoting. My job is to promote your fight, blah, 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 blah. And Ryan Garcia noted that Oscar De La Hoya teased a fight between Ryan Garcia and Pacquiao.
Oh my God, yeah.
And Ryan Garcia said, weren't you just promoting the fake Pacquiao fight that I already told you I'm not accepting?
Well, here's the thing. Okay, number one, nobody wants to see Manny Pacquiao and Ryan Garcia. Like, I would not want to see that. The Rolly Romero fight is the fight that I think we all want to see, and I just want to give myself some props. Kind of predicted that one. But
Ryan Garcia posted that on his IG.
Yeah, he had a photo and everything.
I also want to add one more thing to this, to the Oscar De La Hoya Ryan Garcia things before I let you go. Right. So Eddie Hearn and Oscar De La Hoya got into it at some point. Oscar De La Hoya tweeted at him on June 4th, at Eddie Hearn, stay in your lane. This is a warning. This was on Sunday. And Eddie Hearn just tweeted a gif of himself just sort of dusting off his shoulder as if to say no sweat. Oscar De La Hoya also said on his Instagram story that Ryan Garcia has so many people giving him bad advice. And Jake Paul weighed in. And Jake Paul, a lot of people said that he should actually sign Ryan Garcia, which we'll get to later. So,
well, why don't you get to it right now? Because I mean, I want to hear your thoughts on that. Like, how would you feel? Because that's the big question is, we know that in boxing, if you want to get out of a deal, you could probably get out of a deal. Now, this isn't the first time that Oscar has been in the news like this. Like, look at what happened with him and Canelo. Canelo did not really like how Oscar handled things in terms of how many fights he was getting. Canelo had to get out of that deal. I think it's really likely that Ryan wants to get up out of this deal, right? Because till 2026, that's a long time. That's 3 more years. So my biggest question to you, Bryan, is, do you think Jake Paul is a better fit for him? If not, where else would you like to see Ryan Garcia go?
Wow. There's a lot here. I think if you just look at the sort of matchmaking element of it, Jake Paul is interesting because he's not really like, he just does whatever the fuck he wants, right? Ryan Garcia saying he was abandoned in that interview. was interesting. And because he really took to heart, nobody was with him at the presser, which we talked about. I'm like, look, that's a red flag for me. If nobody is with you after this loss, which was supposedly the fight of the year, yeah, you shouldn't be alone at the press conference after that, and then getting respect from Gervonta Davis's team, who just knocked you out in the 7th round with a body shot. If you look at the top guys at 140, which is the weight class that Ryan Garcia is going to be at moving forward, Regis Prograis at Matchroom, Teofimo Lopez, Jose Ramirez, Arnold Barbosa, all at top rank. Jack Catterall's at Matchroom, if you want to call him one of the top 140 guys. He just won. Gary Antoine Russell is a PBC guy. Subriel Matias was a PBC guy, may still be. We'll see. Like, we're still trying to figure that out. Richardson Hitchens, one of the top guys coming up, is fighting Montana Love in July on the Alicia Baumgartner card. And the winner of that presumably will become sort of next in line for that contender spot, for that rising contender spot. Not necessarily number one contender for the title, but you get what I'm saying in terms of being a rising star in that weight class. Sandor Martin, he can kind of fight wherever at this point. Jose Pedraza is still with top rank. Richard Comey still with top rank. I would say that they're not the top of that weight class. And then O'Hara Davies, formerly with Matchroom with MTK Global, fights on the zone. He and Eddie Hearn don't like each other. But he was ordered to fight Rolly Romero, who's another one of these top guys, for the WBA title that Rolly Romero, quote unquote, won against Ismael Barroso, which was the worst stoppage that I've seen this year. And then ... Devin Haney, question mark, because he might leave Top Rank. He's not really, he denied extending with them when Paulie Malignaggi said he did, presumably opening up the door for him to sign with Matchroom, which Eddie Hearn and Devin Haney have sort of been flirting on social media doing that. So you can kind of go anywhere if you're Ryan Garcia. And at the end of the day, he's Ryan Garcia. So he's going to bring the star power wherever he goes. What do you think is the best of these options? Like, what will be your preference as a fight fan, but someone who's covering the sport?
Okay, so I think one of the most important things that Ryan Garcia did to show us that he was for real was to go to Derek James as his trainer. Like, that was step one. That kind of told me that I'm taking this more seriously than I ever have. I'm going to start training with one of the best trainers in the world in a camp that is loaded, right? You're talking about Spence, you're talking about Charlo, and then you got Anthony Joshua. And I know you're not the biggest fan, Brian, but listen, he's had success at heavyweight. He's had success at heavyweight, but
Frank
he's not
Martin too.
One of the top heavyweights. Yeah, who I'm waiting for a big fight from Frank as well. But that showed to me that Ryan Garcia, after that Tank loss, what he went through, his team not being there, like even during that presser, I was like, yo, where's Oscar? And he was saying, yo, I got death threats, couldn't be there. Bottom line is that's your fighter and you weren't there. And then you saw Tank and his team consoling Ryan, being there for him. And, I listen, like, I know I've been hyping up Tank a lot, but that just showed me like how good of people Tank and his team are to do that for Ryan, right? Because up until leading on to that fight, it was a lot of back and forth. But at the end of the day, these guys have respect for each other. And when the team that, just took you out, knocked you out, knew that you had an injury to your rib, is the one consoling you after the fight, that doesn't look good. It's just not, it's not a good look. I think he does end up leaving Golden Boy Promotions. And we talked about this after he went over to Derek James. I think he gets out of that contract. I think the Jake Paul one is really, really interesting because as much as people don't like Jake Paul, listen, he promotes really well. He's gotten Amanda Serrano to a level where people that aren't even casual fans like are loving it, right? Because we're seeing Amanda Serrano be where she should be, and it's taken the women's boxing to a whole entire different level.
Yeah.
Ryan Garcia and Jake Paul together, I wonder what they could do. And here's the thing, would it be the best fights? I don't know, because I think Top Rank is the best at 140. How would they promote a guy like Ryan Garcia? I mean, Ryan Garcia promotes himself essentially, right? They would have to do the least work. But I think when you take a look at that roster, I think it really depends what Ryan Garcia wants his career to be at this point. Because I think if he wants to be the best at 140 pounds, you go over to Top Rank. Or possibly even Matchroom if, they do sign Subriel if they do get Devin Haney.
Right.
Because Ryan Garcia, Devin Haney, they've had back and forth. Regis Prograis, Ryan Garcia could be a crazy fight. I think Regis would win, but that's a blockbuster fight. And I mean, listen, Subriel Matias is kind of the boogeyman, right?
Exactly.
Like who's going to fight him? So there's definitely some options, but those would probably be my favorite for Ryan. I think they could take boxing to another level, though, for fans that aren't, diehard fans. If he did go with Jake Paul, I think that opens up different doors for boxing, which could be good for the sport, regardless if you like Jake Paul or not. What he does is really interesting. However, I think he has to leave Golden Boy, man. Like, I don't like him there. I don't like what Oscar has handled this situation. And Oscar's the one that looks bad here. And listen, you know my love for Oscar, man. Having some Cali roots, Bryan. I don't want to see this.
Yeah.
I don't want to see this, right?
Yeah.
But it's not a good look. And after the Canelo thing, you think about this now, like this is not a good look for Oscar at all. So I would like to see Ryan Garcia go to Top Rank, to be honest. Best roster. Number 2 would be Matchroom if Matchroom does get Devin Haney and if they do end up signing Subriel Matias.
For me, my last point on this is it just comes down to who's going to get him the best fights. And I just seen Jake Paul fight on ESPN. He's not a top ranked guy, but they made that work. He's fought on Showtime. He's not a PPC guy, but they made that work. And yes, it's Jake Paul, but I think the point is, if he's going to be sort of spearheading this promotionally, he'll get you where you need to be, right? In a way that other promoters are going to be like, Top Rank is ESPN, end of story. Showtime is PBC, or PBC is Showtime or Fox, end of story, right? Like that's kind of where it ends. There are not a lot of promoters who can like just take their fighters sort of anywhere. Lou DiBella is somebody who does that, right? For example, if he signs with Jake Paul, that'd be interesting just from a social media standpoint that you just mentioned. I think that's a great point, like that people have to look at when you're talking about some of these dudes who are in their mid-20s and younger.
Sorry, just not to cut you off, but it's also unconventional for him to sign with a guy like Jake Paul, because then you're totally changing the game. And then MVP Promotions has a fighter that's like the real deal, right? Then you're stacking that roster. You got Amanda Serrano, you got Ryan Garcia. Like could be a big move for boxing. And he's not going to the typical promoter at that time. So I think the Jake Paul thing is the most interesting thing.
There's been smoke about Jake Paul and Devin Haney also.
Yes.
Is that going to be an option there, right? Like, I think ultimately I just want to see Ryan Garcia in big fights. If they're going to make Ryan Garcia versus Rolly Romero, I don't care who's promoting him. I would just like to see that fight. I also think Ryan Garcia would win that fight based on what we've seen from Rolly Romero in his last 2 performances, really, but particularly his last performance, where that was one where he was a massive favorite. I think even minus 1,000 or 1,100 or something.
He was fighting a guy that was 40 years old. Come on,
like who can pop? But at the same time, that was just a miserable performance, and
worst stoppage I've seen in a very long time.
Mr. Weeks still has to answer for that, and I don't think he will, because boxing is boxing. But that's where we are in terms of Ryan Garcia. And ultimately, I just want to see him in big fights, and I think he wants to be in big fights. And I think 140 will be an interesting weight class for him, because there's a lot of guys in that division who could give him good fights. It's just a matter of, as it is with anybody else, can they make these fights happen and not just have people talking about fights that they want and them actually not happening?
Yeah, and you know what? Here at TheMandatory, we want to know your thoughts. Where should Ryan Garcia go? Should he roll with Oscar till 2026? Do you see that happening? I don't, because there's friction in this relationship. But let us know. Drop some comments below if you're listening to this. If you're listening to it on the audio side, you can always hit us up on our social media pages. It's at TheMandatory TKO. We're on Twitter, IG, TikTok. So make sure to subscribe to the show as well. If you're watching on YouTube, if you like the content, hit that like button. It helps the channel grow, and we'll be back with some more content. But make sure you let us know what you think about this whole Ryan Garcia and Oscar De La Hoya situation.